Hi there, my name is Jason Fair. I'm a VP of Digital Strategy here at Digivid Bio. I've had the honor to work with clients in healthcare, life science, med tech, and diagnostics for over a decade now, specifically on the digital side, but then also on the video side to educate, influence our clients and about their solutions. And then specifically, the passion for me is being able to help with patient outcomes at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And I am Sean Bollinger. I too have been in this field for over a decade, probably actually 2 decades in digital marketing and analytics and all of that. So yeah, I worked in big brands, small brands alike, and exciting place to be for marketing with the accessibility of data. So looking forward, Jason, to talking more about that and how that applies to the field that we're working in now.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun today, Sean, and we're going to unpack a lot of questions that have surfaced between you and I here at the agency for the last couple of years, specifically since we've been running a lot of these NPI digital kind of first party execution campaigns. And we've aggregated a lot of these questions to unpack. So, if you're an HCP marketer, you're watching this and you've never heard of NPI numbers, that's totally fine. We're going to start pretty slow and then kind of ramp up with a lot of the questions today. So no matter what your knowledge base is for digital marketing or reaching HCPs online, I think we'll cover the gamut today specifically. And hopefully after this, you'll have some golden nuggets that you can take back, obviously to your company and be able to execute some of these. Sean and I want to definitely empower you on this. And we get it, right? Sean, as marketers, it's one of those things where the sellers out there have continually been challenged, which started long before the pandemic. Most providers don't want to see the sales reps, right? It's like a locked door that they don't want to get in. And then in turn, it's kind of made the marketers' burden more challenging now because the sellers are really wanting to understand more about how the marketing team is working to influence and educate these niche HCPs online. So it's definitely, the silos have been broken down, right? And so sales and marketing are probably more aligned than they ever have, right, for years. And so for today, we definitely want to get into these questions. And the way Sean and I went through this is, again, we've just kind of building upon, like if we're talking to a client for the first time, what do we start with? We also want to talk through specifically how the NPI targeting works. But obviously curating audiences is very important. So we're going to go through some of those questions. And then specifically, as I was mentioning, when it comes to how the actual NPI targeting works, we want to showcase that to you. And then ultimately implementing these types of different strategies. There's a variety of different ways that you can do that. So we're going to go through that pretty extensively. And then finally, we want to get into the creative, right? What sort of creatives make sense for these types of campaigns, but then also kind of where the rubber meets the road, right? Like what kind of reporting, right, do we showcase for some of these things? So Sean, if you're cool with it, let's get into this.
Let's do it, Jason. That sounds great.
All right. So for the audience targeting, I think this is kind of a main question that comes up pretty frequently is, how do you know that specific provider or that NPI number is actually like online? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. So basically it's the technology is a persistent user ID. So when that particular user signs in, usually using an email address, but they're identifying themselves somewhere. This is typically done in Gmail, email platforms. It's done in recruiting type platforms. And that's more specific to where a lot of our data comes from and how we're able to identify both them and their position as a healthcare provider and what kind of healthcare provider, and then matching it, of course, to their NPI. So that's really how the technology works. It's been around for a long time. Obviously, with the concept of cookieless environments going away for several years, it's currently still available, but they talked about it for years of going away. Now, basically, they came up with ways to get around that, and that's the technology that they're using today. So that's how we know.
Awesome. No, that's powerful for sure. And then, obviously when clients come to us and we're working with them to figure out like different audiences, HCP audiences, how, when we're curating these different lists, do we actually provide the NPI number list, or does that client, give that to us? And then kind of the second part of that question is, are those ICD-10 or like CPT codes good data to use as well?
Cool. Yeah. So the answer is yes for both. So we can either curate the list for them, and we can build up that list. There's a whole list of different criteria, including ICD-10, CPT codes. You could do it not just by, do they use this or have they used this code frequently or recently, but you can also do it by how much, right? So you could rank a list. So if it's a long list of providers that are using a particular procedural code, you could rank it and say, only the top ones or maybe the lower ones because you want to get more. This gets really interesting because there are particular codes attached to also prescriptions. So if you're targeting a specific competitor, this could be a way to get your diagnostic, your test in front of the audience that's using a competitive product or a complementary product for that matter. Yes, absolutely. So in the other way that this is used is if you are looking to kind of engage your customers with a different message than maybe ones that are not your customers. So that's a list that you would provide us on the NPI level. Or if you have an ABM type strategy where you have particular audience that you want to get in front of, then we can certainly use that list. We can either use it for targeting and messaging, but we could also use it just for segmentation within the reporting as well, so that you can see how the behaviors and response and engagement is perhaps different for a different group of people that you are interested in looking at. So, and so we can do a combination, we can do one or the other. So whatever works. The top line is usually by specialty. So if it's a, particular segment, subspecialty in cardiology, for example, we could certainly do that.
Awesome. And then is there a certain size? We get this all the time, right? Like how big do these lists have to be? What's the minimum? Like what's the maximum? Like what are your kind of best practices for list size?
Yeah. So a lot of that just coincides, one, with the ability to reach an audience that's available. So that the low end is usually at about 1,000. You don't want to usually go below that. The high end, you can really go as high as you would like. Part of that is based on budget. So obviously, if you're reaching more of an audience, then you should have a budget that supports reaching that size of audience. Otherwise, your frequency or how often they see that message is reduced, right? So we try to recommend a balance in there somewhere. Like we don't want to overspend to our audience, but we also don't want to underspend. We want to engage them and have them take notice that we're trying to engage them. And so the budget has to support that.
Gotcha. No, that's wonderful. Because I know, some clients in the space, again, whether it's diagnostic, healthcare, life science, or even medical device, like sometimes they have a really niche audience and it's a small amount. So sometimes it could be under 1,000, but I think what you're mentioning is sometimes we're layering in frequency, right? So sometimes where you don't want to saturate that audience, but at the same time, there could be different tactics that you could layer in there. And I know we'll get into some of that when it comes to implementation. So, But what you're kind of saying is right around kind of that 1,000 mark would be kind of that minimum to actually be a viable test to run this type of campaign.
Yeah. And one other thing, so since you're talking about like a test campaign, because that's, everyone wants to, who hasn't done this before, they kind of want to get in and kind of give it a try and see how it goes. So one of the great ways to be able to do that is to think about it more scientifically, perhaps in using a control group. So some of our clients are doing that as well, where they want to be able to measure the performance and the return that they're getting from this type of advertising investment, right? And so creating a control group that doesn't receive the advertising or the messaging, and then comparing it to the list that does, can be really beneficial to better understand what the value is in the end. So keep that in mind as you're creating that list, because you could also create a bigger list and then take out a portion, 10% or so, for your control group to compare against. Whether that's a curated list like we have, generated for them based on ICD-10 or CPT code, or if it's the client wants to curate that list, maybe it's a customer list or something like that. It's a smart way to market. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's one of those things, Sean, where, this is digital, right? So there's a lot of different things different levers that we can pull. And then to your point about different audiences. So I love that kind of like the 10% as kind of a control group to see, the effectiveness. So let's get into specifically, so we covered some audience stuff. Let's get into how the actual NPI targeting works. So again, these are kind of high level, which again, if you're just learning about NPI targeting, this will definitely help. So Sean, what are some, or what websites are these ads typically running on?
Sure. So when we're starting a new campaign, primarily we recommend programmatic display. So in display advertising, the ads are run pretty much on any website that allows for banner advertising. So that typically falls into the categories of lifestyle, news, sports, weather, those types of sites, any kind of lifestyle sites, so blogs, that sort of thing as well. And so those are the websites that these ads are run on. Essentially, we don't really pick the websites. We create a whitelist of networks and websites to be on for, we don't want to be on any websites that are, not related to the brand in any way, or that we wouldn't want to be on. So we do have a whitelist, but that's thousands of websites, right, that we're able to advertise on. And then we are able to just follow wherever our audience is, right? So if they're reading sports, that's where we find them and deliver the ads. If they're on a lifestyle site looking up vacations or what have you, that's where we are. So we let them decide where we deliver the ads and not the other way around.
Cool. Makes complete sense. I know this has popped up a couple times. That's the goal, is obviously to, for these types of campaigns, we're following, we're engaging, we're educating them wherever they go. But is there a way for you to set up the campaign, Sean, that doesn't, the certain sites that you're like, hey, clients come to us, they're just like, we don't want to run on these specific sites. Is that available?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are like premium sites out there. So there's different categories of sites. So premium sites are things like brands that you would recognize, right? Like CNN. I don't know. There's a whole lot of Fox News and so forth that are kind of highbrow or more expensive sites. So generally we have a mix, right? Because to me, getting in front of the audience is the value, not necessarily where we're getting in front of them. But if there is a reason that you wanted to only be on like premium websites or certain websites, we certainly can do that. It's more expensive for those, as you might imagine, but it certainly can be done. We also can run not just in display, I should mention, we can run like on LinkedIn, we can run on Meta platforms as well. So there are other networks and places where we can run besides just through display.
Gotta love it. Technology's great, right? It's our friend. Yeah. And then specifically, do the ads, would they only run on desktop computers?
Yeah. So absolutely not. So they run on whatever device that provider is on. We're actually able to connect devices that a particular provider uses. So whether they're, using a laptop at work or a desktop at work, and then they're using their iPad at home or their phone, and even connected television, streaming television. So we're able to connect those dots as well. So yet another platform that we can run advertising on is streaming television, which is also connected to streaming audio. So we can run there as well. So all of those devices connected, and we can run on all of those different platforms, follow that, the NPI named provider.
Yeah, there's definitely a couple reports I've seen. I think just normal user behavior for most people. And, HCPs, providers are humans too, right? So they definitely go to these lifestyle sites, but they're typically, to your point, they're toggling between, I think, 4 or 5 different devices, right? So that's good that, obviously this type of technology is across different devices. So let's switch gears a little bit here. Let's get strategic here, Sean. Let's talk through a couple things when it comes to implementation, but then also some different strategies. So for this type of tactic, clients come to us and sometimes they may have a new medical device that they're launching in the marketplace, or sometimes clients come to us and they have, kind of a legacy diagnostic test that they're just trying to re-engage. When clients come to us with these different challenges or strategies, are these both is there different ways that we can run these types of strategies to really help grow, whether it's again new acquisition or a re-engagement campaign? How do you tackle each one of those different, because they are different types of strategies?
They are different types of strategies and different types of messages for the different audiences. So one of the great things about this is we are able to segment and curate even different audiences for different purposes, different messages, right? So I've actually seen this strategy work really well for those that want to kind of start into this, right? And that could be using the list you already have. So that those customers that you're trying to re-engage, right? So maybe they've ordered once or twice, but they should be ordering, hundreds of times, perhaps a month, but that's fallen off, right? So who those providers are, and then we can use that list to re-engage them, right? I've also seen this in a cross-sell opportunity, right? So they already know the brand, they are already ordering a particular test. Maybe it's a diagnostic type test, but you want them to get into an MRD type test, or a genetic test to find different markers and things or reasons for the recurrence. So those types of applications can work really well because they're already familiar with the brand, but you're just letting them know, hey, there's this other test available to you as well. So we can use those lists that come from the customer to target those specific audience groups, if you will. So and those work really well because you generally can see the lift pretty quick. After you're running that campaign, within 3 or 4 months, you should start to see a lift in that order change in that audience. And again, control groups could be really great for this as well. So you can keep a segment of that group out and notice what the lift is in comparison to those that receive the message. So acquisition can be a bigger group, right? Because depending on where you are in your market, that can be a kind of a bigger group to address. So a way to get in could be, a re-engagement or a cross-sale type situation.
Great. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of what you mentioned. There's no one size fits all, right? We really get strategic, you and the team, obviously. And when we're on calls, we really want to understand, send us the list, right? Or we can generate it, but what's the goal of this list, right? Why have you created this list and what can we do? I know you just remember in a call from yesterday on it, there's a medical device procedure, it was a knee replacement. And specifically they're hey, we want to re-engage these surgeons because ultimately they should be doing 2 to 3 procedures a month. But a lot of these, the list that they had sent over is, hey, these surgeons are only doing 1 procedure per month, right? So very strategic, they want to grow that. They know these are current customers, but it's more of a re-engagement type situation. So yeah, that's great. So let's.
Can I just add one thing to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the really interesting thing is if you listen to what we're talking about specific lift for certain people on that list, right?
Right.
But yet we're talking about display advertising. So usually in display advertising, we're talking about general brand lift. And historically, the way to measure that is you do a brand survey and you say, have you heard of this brand before? Right. And you have market research do that for you. And that's how you assess whether or not an awareness type campaign is working, which is where display is an awareness base. What we're talking about is actually bringing that lower funnel into almost a conversion level analysis and response, right? So we're not just looking at, brand lift. In the digital world, a lot of times we would look at the SEO keywords and say, okay, how many brand terms are being searched in a given month, right? And you look at for rises in those brand searches because you brought more awareness to the brand name. But again, it's a little bit fluffy, right? Because it's building awareness, but that assessing that real value is difficult. What we're talking about here is literally this provider got this message this many times, and then he ordered, right? That's pretty powerful when you think about like what you can do with this kind of strategy. So I just wanted to highlight that.
No, that's a great highlight. And to your point, it's, back in the day, there was a lot of waste, right?
Yeah.
Because you weren't for sure if you're reaching the right audience at the right time. Nowadays, we're like so much more precise than we ever have before. And it's exciting. So speaking of precision, let's switch gears a little bit here for the next question. Let's talk about conferences, because most of our clients, probably all of our clients, attend conferences. They've got a booth, they've got, exhibits, they do presentations. So how do these NPI, or do these NPI campaigns, like, do they tie into conferences at all, Sean?
Yeah, sure. So yes, they do. So historically, we haven't really been able to marry the two types of data sets. So geofence technology is kind of a separate way of targeting people. And then the way that we target NPI audiences is a separate technology. Mm-hmm. So we have been able to figure out a way to blend that and be able to actually get an NPI level report from the campaign from a geofence campaign. So we can still run a traditional geofence campaign if that's what you want to do. But if you want to get NPI level data, we can do that as well. And we essentially just layer on the NPIs that we're interested in looking at a particular conference, and then we're able to report against that.
Awesome. And then, so that's huge, right? So a lot of times people, if you're not, scanning badges at the conference, sometimes you miss a lot of those people. So for this, Sean, when we're doing the geofence with the NPI level, so it's one of those things where they saw the ad or they clicked on it, then we can match kind of in the back to say, hey, these are the providers. And we're going to get into reporting a little bit later here, but we should have flipped that. Like, reporting is like so important. We should have talked about that first, but we wanted to kind of talk through kind of strategically how we put these things together for campaigns. But so again, they just really have to click on it or see it. And that's how we tie the reporting to the back end, right, Sean?
That's right. Yeah. And ahead of time, we do have to, with the NPI reporting, we do have to have a sense of who we're watching for, like who we would want to target at an NPI level. So usually we do it pretty broad. So if it's a conference that, targets surgeons or a particular type of surgeon, that's usually what we're filtering for, right? Just so that you're seeing that kind of response and interested or interesting for your business response. So if there's a particular group, subgroup, or other that you want to assess for your business, like if you're thinking of breaking into another segment that is also the audience, it's just important to have that communication with us so that we make sure we include those as part of the targeting as well.
Yeah. And one of the things I love about geofencing for conferences, obviously it's a great way to kind of stand out at the conference. We all know that majority of those impressions are typically served 30 days afterwards, which I think is a good strategy because, as we know, surgeons and providers and physicians, they're all busy at the conferences. They're doing other things. They've got meetings, breakfasts, lunches, all that fun stuff, going to, presentations, those sorts of things. So if you can influence or educate them, 30 days afterwards, is kind of like almost like a retargeting. Honestly, I think that's a better play for this type of campaign. So cool. All right.
Yeah,
so
it totally is. So I'll add just a little bit to it. So,
yeah,
absolutely. So where we see the engagement is usually after the conference, right? And it kind of makes sense because during the conference, hopefully they're paying attention to what's going on there, right? And trying not to, look at their phone and hopefully not email too much, or, everyone has to probably check in, but,
right.
They're trying not to engage on their devices because they're at the conference. So it makes sense that afterward, and we're able to not only follow them on their device that was with them at the conference, but we're able to connect their device to other devices. So it could be served on their desktop at their office once they're back, or even at their home on their iPad as well. So we're able to connect all those things. The other strategy, since we're talking about strategy around conferences that also can be really beneficial, is a pre-conference strategy, right? So if you have a theater coming up or a release or any kind of announcement, or even you're just trying to drive awareness so that you get more booth conversations during the conference, that's really a pre-conference. You've got to kind of prime that. And so again, that NPI targeting is key, where it's, who is the audience that you want to talk to and have that conversation with. Prime the pump, run that, even 30, 60 days ahead of that conference, just to kind of get them salivating and excited, so that when they see your booth and they walk by, they're like, oh yeah, I need to talk to them about, XYZ. And it really can help facilitate the value of the conversations at conferences if you're planning ahead.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Sean, because to your point, it's not just about the conference or 30 days afterwards, right? Most people, it takes, and again, depending on how long your solution's been in the marketplace, or if it's something new, right? It could take 12 months, 6 months for that physician to really understand more about your solution. So a lot of these strategies that we're executing on are long-term, right? This is not a sprint. This is definitely a marathon. Think long-term for these types of tactics and strategies. Speaking of tactics, let's get into some video, right? So can you run video ads when you're doing these NPI level targeting, Sean?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So online video, absolutely. It provides yet another way to get in front of that audience. Video, we know, is powerful. And the way that they're placed, a lot of times it's a forced view. So they have to watch it before they watch the content they're there to watch. So unlike maybe a banner ad that's on like a byline or above or below or in content as they scroll, this is within that video window or that area where the video would play. So this is a forced view. So we see elevated click-through rates. So you're going to see elevated awareness as well. As a result, of course, video, the placement itself, you're still buying at a impression level. So it's a little bit more expensive than display, as you might imagine, because the value is there. But when you evaluate based on a click, so cost per click, if you evaluate it, it actually is more efficient usually than what a banner ad, just because you're getting more clicks per impression.
Cool. Awesome. The other thing, you kind of teed it up earlier in the conversation, specifically around, and again, definitely, as we kind of talk through this, think through an omni-channel approach, right? And you mentioned this earlier about using NPI numbers and then being able to target those providers on LinkedIn. Obviously, this is definitely something you can do. Can you kind of talk through a little bit more about how that works?
Sure. So for LinkedIn, so LinkedIn is a closed network, much like Meta as well. So on LinkedIn, there are some pretty powerful tools, as you know, because it's careers oriented. You can filter and sort your audience based on where they work, how long they've worked there, what kind of skills they have, what kind of position they might be in as far as a title or seniority level. So those are the basic ways within LinkedIn. The other way is you can upload curated audiences that you are either current customers or targets that you're wanting to do. So that's how we're utilizing the LinkedIn technology, is through our data providers with that NPI list. We're able to then use that to upload into LinkedIn for targeting. So that's basically how the technology works. Unfortunately, unlike, and we'll get into the reporting details a little bit later, because it is a closed network. What that means is that I don't get data back on the person level. So we get, how many impressions were delivered by day, how many clicks came through. But unfortunately in LinkedIn and Meta, I'm not able to report to say, hey, Dr. Jonathan Anderson, saw this ad on this day and then clicked on it, like I can in the programmatic display and online video.
Yep, makes sense, totally. And at least when we're doing these types of LinkedIn campaigns, to your point, whatever audiences we're targeting based on the data, that's something that you can upload. So again, we're reducing the waste. We're trying to be as precise as possible. But that's right. Yeah. Unfortunately, LinkedIn is a closed network. So
yeah, and usually I should mention, just as a strategy, so we usually do two audiences. So we do the first party uploaded audience at the NPI level, but then we also try to we create as close as we can using the LinkedIn tools to reach the audience that we're looking to reach, the same audience. And we can kind of assess what might be performing better than the other, and then we can adjust budget based on that response.
Cool. And then we're going to move on to creative, but before we do, I just wanted to give you a couple minutes here just to see if there's any additional tips for marketers when they're strategizing to figure out how do we kind of roll this out? Like anything else you'd want to add here, Sean?
Yeah, so we talked about several different things, but just reiterating some of those things, definitely thinking about a control group. So if you're going to assess what you're going to be doing or what the value is of what we're doing here or what you're testing, that's certainly important. You heard us talk a lot about audience curation and building audiences. So definitely thinking through what makes the most sense for who you want to target, but then aligning the messaging. So we haven't talked as much. We're going to get into the creative side. But obviously the creative makes a big difference. In the consumer world, you're going to get a much higher click rate if you're offering something for free, right? When it's usually, a couple $100s, let's say, or whatever. And so in the healthcare marketing field, obviously that's a little bit different. So that's something to think about, matching your audience with your creative. And we do usually recommend that you have more than one creative running, right? So being able to cycle through multiple creatives. Again, we're going to get into that. And then I think I lost my train of thought. I had one other thing I was going to add, but we'll come back to it later. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I think just to piggyback off some of that too, again, when we're setting these up, it's an omni-channel approach. It doesn't happen overnight. When we're starting these campaigns, it's almost like test, learn, optimize, right? So we're testing the creative, we're testing the audience, but we've got to get that data, right? And that data typically, correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, but really, we're not going to really understand metrics for 3 months, right? 90 days before we even do anything. Sometimes it could be longer, right?
Right. So we'll see metrics right away, right? So we'll know that right away. But what we don't always see is it's a decision process. It takes time to influence somebody and then have them take action, right? So that's the time frame. So part of it is how long after you talk to somebody or educate someone on your product do they then decide to give it a try or to order it again, right? What is that life cycle? And for most, it's 3-4 months is usually a typical time frame for that. So just something to kind of think about. And I did get my other train of thought. So the other thing I wanted to bring up. So we've talked about control groups and audiences and how important that is and matching to your message. The other part is we can also collect data for conversion level metrics. So, and particularly conversion on a landing page or on a website. So that's another point of not just reporting and information, but we can also feed that back into the algorithm, the optimization of the campaign itself, right? So I can continue to optimize based on an audience that converts and that takes action. So it's another way to optimize and report, right? So if they're downloading a case study or they're watching a video on the landing page, those are things that we can feed back and report on and also use to optimize the campaign over time. So that was one thing. That the last thing I wanted to mention too is I will say in the strategy, one of the things that really does help us is any kind of transparency. So a true partnership, true collaboration and conversation about, the good and the bad, and understanding, a little bit more perhaps about the competitive landscape or the challenges that exist or the hesitations that might be out there. And the other strategies that you're already employing, right? Because most of us, this is not our first rodeo. This is not our first time to market for the most part, right? So you've probably implemented, tried, continue to try and retool for different tactics and different strategies. So having that conversation with us can be really helpful because we don't want to learn by then understanding after we've already done something. So helping us learn or educating us on things that you've already learned about your audience, about what seems to work or resonate that doesn't, can be really helpful for us as we help with the strategy for these types of campaigns as well.
Yeah. To your point, I think there's really no one size fits all approach, right? You got to think strategic, got to understand the messaging, got to understand your audience. So super valuable. I'm glad we spent some time on that one. So when we get into, I know we talked through a little bit about creative, but specifically when we're working with clients, typically who's creating these types of different ads, Sean?
Yeah, so the answer is yes. Anyone can create them, right? So we have a whole creative team that can help with this. They're very quick and are definitely able to create this. We can also work with your creative team, whether in-house or external or contractor. We're happy to provide all the specs and information for that. Just talking about creative, so one of the technologies that we do like to implement with the banner ads, because we see a higher click-through rate, is using a technology called HTML5, which is HTML. It's just the current version of HTML that allows us to not just show a static image, but to animate that image a little bit. So it's a little bit better technology than like GIF or a GIF type format, which we can also utilize. It's a bit more efficient because it's HTML. And so it draws the eye because it has the motion to it. And you can also think of it like almost like a slide. We've had clients, start with one color and message and image and then flip to another that kind of progresses it. So again, the motion helps draw the eye, but also can layer on messaging that you want to try and fit into a banner ad. So yeah, that's the answer. We can do both. We can also take the creative that the client creates that's a static version in one size, and then our creative team can then expand it into all the different sizes that we need. We usually run a 7 sizes that just maximizes the placement and inventory that we have available. And then we can animate that and put it in the HTML5 format.
Awesome. Yeah, Sean, I think you knocked out the next 2 questions, which is
crap.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah. Maybe just expand a little bit on, and you kind of talk through the different sets of ads, the different sizes. So there's 7 of those, but then are there any like best practices when, someone's designing them or when we're designing them? Like what are some things that you typically say to clients at first about creative?
So first thing, keep it simple. This is think of it as a billboard when someone's driving by, right? What are they going to notice? What are they going to see? And that could simply just be a brand. It could be an image, and maybe a headline. Usually the subtext, not quite as much, but it can help. It can help with the click through, right? You usually do want to have some kind of reason for them to click. So some kind of offer of, read the full study or, watch the video or whatever that is that you want to, learn more can work as well. It's just not as compelling perhaps as something more succinct, like a study or a testimonial or something like that. But keep it simple. I think that's probably one of the biggest keys. We talked about formats and I think in your next one, the place to start. So usually what our creative team uses if we're starting from scratch is a landing page. So that's the other thing to think about on the creative side. So obviously you need the ad creative to run out there, but then you also really need to think about where you're sending them. What do you want them to do and understand and learn if they are interested, right? So thinking through that landing page, a lot of times it is unique. Or a landing page that's not available on your normal, navigation on your website. It's something specific to this audience or to a pain point that audience that you're hitting on. So really thinking through that landing page. It's another thing we can help with if a client does need help creating a separate landing page, we can help with that. But that's usually where we start when we're creating ads, is that landing page, and then adapting multiple kind of creative versions that would entice people to read more of that content on the page.
Yep. And creative's super important, as we know. And I think the thing you mentioned too, which is pretty critical, since these are digital campaigns running different creative tests, right? A/B tests, different messaging, which again is one reason I love working in the digital space, is because we can do these things and typically they're cost effective, right? So we can definitely create different versions with a small like key marketing message that we change. And I think typically, Sean, when we go into recommending A/B testing, like they're not completely different ads, right? Because what happens is you can't really tell what change you made. Yeah, exactly. So something to consider too when you're doing some A/B testing.
And also when you're looking at A/B testing, there's a couple of different ways you can run it. So I usually recommend that you run more than one message. one message again and again and again becomes kind of, it's just not as impactful if you can at least change the message here and there a little bit. And that's not really true A/B testing, right? So if you wanted to do a true A/B test, you would segment your audience and you would say, this audience only gets this ad. This audience only gets this ad. And then you're assessing what that response is. So if you're doing that, you have to consider perhaps your budget, because again, maybe one version in both of those is like one for each is maybe not enough. You may need 4 different creatives, so you can still change it up so that it's not, kind of repeated again and again to the same audience, but then you're able to assess. So there's different strategies that you can employ to figure out if you're trying to test messages, if it's a true A/B test, or if it's just rotating that message. Because usually what we're seeing is the answer is yes, like people are interested in, it's usually a pretty minor difference between them, but incrementally over time you could get better and better. So.
Yep. Absolutely. That's great, Sean. So this is like, there's a lot of different components, right, when we put these together. And specifically, I think this is the most exciting one out of all the different components, because this is where you can truly measure the effectiveness of the campaign. So let's get into reporting. And then specifically, are you able to confirm the ads are actually being shown to that specific NPI list? And I know we kind of touched on it, but if you want to, further explain that, that would be great.
Absolutely. So we start with the audience that we're going to target. We tell the platform that this is who we want to target, run ads. And then when we pull the reporting, we basically come full circle, and the platform then says, okay, here's the ad that was served, here's when it was served, and here it was served to. And then we use that the ID and we match it back to the NPI that we said we wanted them to deliver. So yeah, we're able to bring that full circle so that we can then report at the NPI level. So we call it a physician level data report, or a PLD report, because I don't like saying physician level data. But at that level of data, we're able to have all the information about that provider, because it's publicly available information, so it's not really private. And then we can report on all the different metrics that are associated with that provider. So how many times they've seen the ads, which ads they've seen, which ones they've clicked on, how many times they've clicked on it, and even down to like the precise time and date that they clicked on or saw the ad. So we provide that to our clients on a periodic basis. So usually it's a monthly basis. That makes the most sense for most of our clients. But if they needed it more often to take action on it quicker or sooner, or if it was more timely, then we can certainly facilitate that as well. So that's how we're able to do that. And I should mention, we've talked about this technology and the way that we're able to bring it down to that really an engaged conversion level data. Like this is a warm lead, right? Somebody who clicked on your ad came in. This is an engaged person. They're at least curious at some level, right? So it is engaging. So I think thinking through strategically on your side how you're going to use that information, use that data, right? You talked about, I think at the beginning of this conversation, how close marketing and sales now have to be because it's so difficult to get in for these sales representatives to get into the practices. So figuring out, I think internally that business logic of what makes sense and how it's going to work, I think is really strategic and important so that you can take action on this, because it's certainly actionable.
Yeah. And to your point, these reports are super detailed, and, ultimately it kind of depends how the marketing team and sales teams are set up. So I know some scenarios with clients, they specifically are, and we'll get into this question here a little bit too, specifically around, feeding into the CRM. So what happens in some cases, right now we're, this is a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, downloaded, those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. But sales, the marketing team can definitely upload this, right? And then they can do the, reps are in certain parts of the country, right? So if they want to figure out how to kind of slice and dice the data based on these leads coming in, that's a great way to do it, depending on the size of your sales team, right? So to your point, there is actionable data here that can be further progressed beyond just the digital campaign. So ultimately we're, using these digital campaigns to educate, influence, right? But then we're turning those over, right? And then so hopefully the sales team and marketing team can continue to nurture them afterwards, right? Because if I'm a sales rep in a certain territory and all of a sudden I get this list sent to me by marketing, like these are the 10 physicians that saw or clicked on the ad, right? That's a lead gen report. And then they can kind of cross-reference to be like, hey, have I already seen these physicians? Have I been into the practice, right? Now they've got more information that they can go with to actually reach out if they need to. But I know specifically for this question for reporting, can these reports, I know they're kind of manual at this point, is there any automation tools right now, Sean, that they can be fed into like a CRM like Salesforce or HubSpot?
Yeah, so we do have some limited support for CRM direct API uploads. So yeah, definitely reach out to us because that's an ever-changing list to see, what's the latest and current, see if it matches with the CRM that you might be using. But also we can set up automated data reports that come out, like you said, in kind of a CSV file format that also is pretty easy to integrate with most platforms.
Okay, cool. And then we're wrapping here, Sean. So I didn't know if there's any last minute things. I know we covered a ton of ground between audience targeting, how the NPI targeting works, talked through a lot of different strategies, implementation, creative, and then obviously wrapped here with reporting. Is there anything else that you want to mention, say, as kind of like final few minutes here?
So I think, as we talked about, display is historically been an awareness-based tactic. We're bringing it down to awareness, but all the way down to actionable converting type data, which I think is super powerful. And I think the cool thing about this technology is that, we also talked about, how do we know it's them? And, how does this technology work? And how do we report? Well, we're smart, I guess, but we're not that smart, right? We were not the ones to figure this out.
Right.
It actually is our biopharma or our pharma friends that figured this out first, right? They're the ones that put in the investment and the money because they had the money, right, to market, to figure out this technology. And so for years, this was really unreachable, right? It was way too expensive for most companies that didn't have really big marketing spends because the pay to play was real, and just to get into it was really expensive. Now that's not the case, right? It's been around long enough. The technology is available. There's enough data providers out there that are providing this level of data that can be used for marketing purposes. So it's now competitively priced, right? So we can now make it more accessible. So I think that's what gets me excited about this, is that this is incredible technology that we're now able to access, right? And to utilize for even smaller organizations and organizations that are working to get ahead because they have amazing technology. So let's help them get ahead. So I think that's probably my last thought on this, Jason. Thanks.
Awesome.
So much.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful, Sean. So, if you're an HCP marketer and you're just watching this for the first time and you're maybe a newbie to this, hopefully, we unpacked a lot of things that you can take back as far as golden nuggets. Or if you're a seasoned marketer and you've been doing this for a while, hopefully you've, garnished some new things that can help, like increase your campaign success and those sorts of things. But obviously, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Sean or I. We're happy to help and navigate these waters when it comes to using this first party data to accelerate, right, the adoption of your solution. So I think we're signing off for now. Awesome. Bye for now.
Thanks so much, Jason.